Good afternoon or good evening, depending on where you might be. My name is Kevin Michael Grace, and a very special edition of the KMG show, starting an hour earlier because the town hall debates, Trump and Biden, they're going head to head at 8 p.m. Eastern Time, 5 p.m. Pacific Time. So I know that a lot of my audience would want to watch one or the other of them or switch back and forth. So I didn't want to put myself in competition. So here we are, an hour early. And just a reminder that in an hour and a half at, let me see if I can get this right, 4:30 Pacific Time, 7:30 Eastern Time, I'm going to be talking about Charlie Kaufman's new film, I'm thinking of Ending Things. So what do you think I'm going to start talking about today? Well, I guess it's going to be the Streisand effect, part two. A little worried just before the show started because my notifications and my direct messages disappeared. That is to say, from Twitter. And I thought, oh, have I been booted off Twitter too? Have I been locked out? Well, my messages are back, but my notifications are not back. And it's nothing to see here yet, it says. Very strange. I was informed about 50 minutes ago that Twitter was supposedly over capacity, probably with all the messages they've sent out. Suspending people, locking down accounts. But we had more information from the New York Post and from Rudolph Giuliani on Hunter Biden. In case you haven't been following this story, Hunter Biden is the crackhead, grifter, incestuous son of Joe Biden, the Democratic presidential nominee. Not to be confused with the late Beau Biden, a saintly character, apparently. And I only bring this up not to mock Joe Biden's grief, which I have no doubt is genuine, but this is a very womanly thing to do. Vote for me because my son died of cancer. No, it's not the done thing, especially for a man. But what does the Joe Biden campaign have to say about these revelations from the New York Post? This is from Raw Story. Democratic presidential nominee Joe Biden is lashing out at Rupert Murdoch's New York Post for what the paper refers to as Russian disinformation regarding Ukrainian allegations against his son, Hunter Biden. Yeah, okay. They're going to die on this hill. They're going to die on the hill of Russiagate. That is to say, the Democrats and their media pals. Nah, pals isn't strong enough a word. How about co-equals, or for the time being, unindicted conspirators? No, it was that bad man Putin that was responsible. In a statement Wednesday, Biden campaign spokesman Andrew Bates said, quote, "We have reviewed Joe Biden's official schedules from the time, and no meeting, as alleged by the New York Post, ever took place." Ha, ha, ha. Yes, we've looked at his official schedules because that meeting that you want to have regarding influence peddling or bribery money, you're definitely going to have your scheduler, your secretary, put that in the official log. Right? Because it would be, irresponsible. It would be simply irresponsible. Senior Biden advisors Michael Carpenter and Amos Hochstein staffed the vice president at the time and told Politico that while there was never an official meeting, it's technically conceivable that Pozharsky, this is of the Ukraine, would have approached Biden on the sidelines of some broader U.S.-Ukraine event, but they emphasized that they had no indication that it happened. "I've literally never heard of this guy in my life," said Hochstein. "This is a Russian disinformation operation said Carpenter, a former Deputy Secretary of Defense who specialized in Russia, Eurasia, and the Balkans, and now serves as managing director of the Penn Biden Center. Yeah, okay, yes. Again, this story has never been about Russia. It's been about the Ukraine. Now, Eli Lake, who's a very well-connected journalist, he is going to die on that hill too. He wrote, "It's entirely fair to suspect that the Hunter Biden email story is either Russian disinformation or the fruits of Russian hacking. Journalists should write those stories. Censoring the story itself is un-American, and for Russiagators of all people to push this line is chutzpah." I commented, "It's entirely fair to suspect that the attempted suppression of the Hunter Biden email story is the result of courtier journalists terrified that their role in the greatest act of sedition in American history, the Steele dossier Russiagate hoax, will be fully revealed and punished." Oh, Emily Bazelon, who is also a very well-placed journalist, she is a staff writer for the New York Times, co-host of the Slate Political Gabfest, Truman Capote Fellow at the Yale Law School. That last one has got to be a joke. I mean, it's got to be. Emily Bazelon, didn't she used to write for Slate? Let's see. Does it mention the Truman Capote chair? Isn't she the daughter? Her father was an attorney and her mother was a psychiatrist. Yes, that's where I know the name Bazelon. Yes, she is very well connected indeed. The granddaughter of David Bazelon, formerly a judge on the U.S. Court of Appeals for the D.C. Circuit, and second cousin twice removed. Oh, feminist Betty Friedan. I wonder whether she was ever at the Kennedy School. Strangely, no, apparently. Oh, okay. Bazelon is also a senior research scholar in law and Truman Capote Fellow for creative writing and law at Yale Law School. Okay, so what does she have to say? Is the American First Amendment the best way to protect free speech? I wonder what she's going to say. For the New York Times Magazine, I argue that the answer is maybe not. At least we should consider how democracies in Europe and Canada, etc., do it by balancing free speech with other pro-democratic values, like, say, the suppression of free speech. For instance, the determination that hate speech is not free speech, and that truth is not a defense to accusations of hate speech. That is the law of Canada as determined by the Supreme Court of Canada. Yes, if you're a foreigner listening into this, I'll just repeat, just in case you thought that I was misspeaking. The Supreme Court of Canada has ruled that truth is not a defense to accusations of hate speech. So I responded to Emily Bazelon thus: the US elite is not even hiding it anymore. It wants the opposition silenced. Beware of anyone who posits Canada as an example. There is no wrong think allowed in my country's mass media. No newt nada. Our journalists do little more than lightly paraphrase liberal press releases. From Breitbart, Sean Moran, the Joe Biden campaign claimed on Thursday that a New York Post article containing allegedly damaging information about Joe and Hunter Biden is false because Twitter censored it. Jamal Brown, the national press secretary for Biden's campaign, said, quote, "Twitter's response to the actual article itself makes clear that these purported allegations are false and are not true." So Twitter is apparently at the head of America's Ministry of Truth. Maybe you didn't know that America has a Ministry of Truth, but it appears that Twitter and its third-party fact checkers constitute America's Ministry of Truth. Facebook and Twitter decided to censor a New York Post article saying that, contrary to Biden's claims, Biden allegedly met with an executive at Burisma, which is a Ukrainian oil company or natural gas company, when he was vice president. Hunter Biden, Joe Biden's son, reportedly arranged the meeting while he was working as a lobbyist for the company. Senator Josh Hawley, Republican of Missouri, in response to Biden's claim, asked rhetorically if Twitter has now made an editorial claim about the truthfulness of the New York Post story. He said, wait, now Joe Biden is using Twitter as the factual authority on whether the New York Post story is accurate. Is this serious? So big tech monopolies donate massive money to Biden-Harris. Biden gets the monopolies to censor negative stories about him and then points to the monopolies as experts, talk about collusion. Well, as I mentioned yesterday, I believe, we have exactly the same thing with the Steele dossier, Russiagate, that various members of the American deep state leaked, dozens or hundreds of stories to members of the news media. Members of the news media they may or may not have been having sexual intercourse with. And it would appear that many of these leaks were against the law. But the media reported these leaks as, sources in the know, that sort of thing. And then what the deep state did was it took the media's reports of the leaks, the lies, which had been leaked to them by the deep state, as evidence that their original lies were true. That's pretty impressive, don't you think? Twitter censorship of the New York Post led Senate Judiciary Committee Republicans, such as Senator Ted Cruz, Republican of Texas, to subpoena Twitter CEO Jack Dorsey. Quote, Twitter is actively blocking right now this instant stories from the New York Post alleging corruption and the Biden family receiving millions of dollars for communist China. This is election interference, and we are 19 days out from an election as no precedent in the history of democracy. The Senate Judiciary Committee wants to know what the hell is going on. Well, I think they know what's going on. Story from the New York Post by Leah Eustashewicz. That's a tough one. Obama says Biden would use his good instincts if elected in 2020. Yeah. You notice that Obama was president for 8 years. He never said a single thing that was memorable, except perhaps that if he had a son, that son would look like Trayvon Martin. So he's supposed to be a kind of great communicator. Oh, this is your endorsement of Joe Biden. He would use his good instincts and aides who would turn those into actual policy that works. Obama opened up about his vice president of 8 years in the latest episode of Pod Save America. He understands the importance of surrounding himself with people who are smart and are, believe in science and believe in expertise and believe in, institutional knowledge and experience. It means that, his North Star will be good. But at the same time, you'll have a lot of people around him who are able to translate his good instincts into actual policy that works. No, Joe Biden does not have good instincts. We know, because he said so, that he had a don't ask, don't tell policy with his crackhead, grifter, incestuous son, Hunter Biden, with regard to Hunter Biden's lobbying. Once again, Biden was the Obama administration's point man on Ukraine and on China. And guess who was hoovering up the dough from Ukraine and China? That would be Hunter Biden. And apparently Joe Biden didn't think that it would be prudent, or he thought that it would be prying to ask his son, you're not doing any lobbying with regard to Ukraine or China, are you? Oh, dear, you are. Okay, well, either you're going to have to quit doing that, or I'm going to have to tell President Obama that, as embarrassing as that might be, I'm going to have to recuse myself from dealings with the Ukraine and China. And since I'm not going to put myself in that position, you're going to stop being involved in the Ukraine and China. And as I pointed out yesterday, and Alex Berenson pointed out today, it's not just that his son Hunter Biden was a lobbyist, it's that he's a crackhead who'd been to rehab how many times? 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. A crackhead also with a huge alcohol problem and a huge stripper and prostitute problem. Apparently, Joe Biden never thought that any of this might, bite him in the ass. That never occurred to him. And what that tells me is that Joe Biden has no good instincts, none whatsoever, that he is a disaster waiting to happen, and it's already happened. Here's another story from the Post, from the aforementioned Lisa, also by Ebony Bowden. 3 members of Biden campaign team test positive for COVID-19 as Kamala Harris grounded. Okay. Joe Biden's campaign announced Thursday that a 3rd person with ties to the campaign and its flight crew has tested positive for COVID-19. Earlier, Kamala Harris's travel was canceled through the weekend after 2 people she recently traveled with tested positive for COVID-19, etc., etc., etc. Oh, I see. Because the crew member remained over 50 feet from the nominee at all times, Biden team said he will not be quarantined and continue his campaign travel as normal. 50 feet. That's the distance now? We've been told repeatedly, and people who disagree with this have been threatened in various ways. They have been silenced, censored by social media, that you wear a mask, you keep the distance of 6 feet, and then you're golden. And apparently, Kamala Harris's campaign does not believe this. Once again, from Kayleigh McEnany and this woman, Leah Eustashevich, as she has been working hard, because another story from her. Kayleigh McEnany, Twitter has me at gunpoint to delete the post's Hunter Biden story. White House Press Secretary Kayleigh McEnany tore into Twitter for locking her account, saying the administrators essentially have me at gunpoint until she deletes the post she shared of the New York Post's Hunter Biden story. She was among the Twitter users blocked from spreading the Post's exclusive front page story on Biden's alleged hard drive and an email linking Joe Biden to his son's job at a Ukrainian energy company, with the social media site claiming hacked materials were used in the report. It's not a temporary blockage, McEnany told Fox News host Sean Hannity Wednesday. When I log onto my Twitter account, it says I'm permanently banned. They essentially have me at gunpoint and said, unless you delete a news story by the New York Post, I cannot regain access to my account. When she attempted to tweet the Post story, McEnany got a message from Twitter saying, your account has been blocked. We've determined that this account violated the Twitter rules, specifically for violating our rules against distribution of hacked material. This is censorship. This is not the American way, she told Hannity. This is not how a freedom-loving democracy operates. We have to hold Twitter accountable, and Facebook too, who is banning the transmission of the story simply because ideologically it hurts the side of the aisle that Silicon Valley prefers. It's sad, it's censorship. This is not America. Make no mistake, if they can ban the press secretary of the United States for President Trump, they can ban you as a citizen, and that is pathetic. On Wednesday night, Twitter CEO Jack Dorsey admitted that blocking URL sharing via tweet or DM with zero context as to why we're blocking, unacceptable. I'm going to suggest that Jack Dorsey has some personnel problems, or maybe he's perhaps not as involved in the day-to-day activities of Twitter as he should be, because I would have thought, oh, the New York Post has printed this story making these terrible allegations against Hunter and Joe Biden, and this is all over the internet, and we want to shut this down. So maybe we should give Jack a call to talk this over with him. Should we shut it down? On what basis should we shut it down? What are we going to say to the people who are shut down? But either that didn't happen, or a call or email was sent and Jack Dorsey wasn't paying attention, or he decided to ignore it. Okay. Back to our reporter of the day, Leah Justashewitz. Twitter locks Trump campaign's account over video related to the post-Hunter Biden bombshell. We're almost getting to the point where it would take less time to note the Twitter accounts that have not been locked. From his own personal account, Mike Hahn tweeted a screenshot of the message from Twitter reading, "Your account has been locked," and showing the post at Team Trump tried to send to its 2.2 million followers on Wednesday afternoon. Joe Biden is a liar who has been ripping off our country for years, the would-be tweet said, with an apparent link to a video. Twitter accused the Trump campaign of violating our rules against posting private information. And the media never does that. Like the New York Times publishing private information of not only Donald Trump's tax returns, but also a great many of his employees. These are federal crimes. But New York Times had no problem with that. And Twitter had no problem with that. I would suggest that the number of tweets and retweets of the Times story about Trump's tax returns was in the millions. In the millions. Miranda Devine at the New York Post writes, "In case there was any doubt that Facebook and Twitter are corruptly partisan, the social media giant censored the Post story Wednesday on Hunter Biden's emails, suggesting he took cash for access to his father, Joe Biden. The bombshell exclusive was trending all Wednesday morning on social media platforms until big tech stepped in to run protection for the Democratic presidential candidate. Facebook announced it would censor the story by reducing its distribution on our platform. And then Twitter intervened. Twitter later attached a new warning to the story. The link you've been trying to access has been identified by Twitter or our partners as being potentially spammy or unsafe." Oh, so if you retweet something from the New York Post, it's going to infect your computer somehow? This suggests, this to me seems potentially actionable. Let's see, did Facebook and Twitter impose the same censorship on the New York Times story on President Trump's leaked or hacked tax returns 2 weeks ago? Did they ever fact check the Times and the Washington Post debunked Russia collusion tall tales? Did they interfere with BuzzFeed spreading the Steele dossier tissue of lies? Nope. Big tech only suppresses information that reflects badly on the Biden campaign. The emails and photographs we have published speak for themselves. They come from the hard drive of Hunter's laptop computer, legally obtained by the Post after he abandoned it at a Mac computer repair shop in Delaware. Let's go to the chat, see if that is working. Yay, it is working. Prussian Juncker, number one, says, "I guess Twitter is down." Mine is. Is anyone else's Twitter down, or is everyone else's Twitter working? Let's see whether my notifications are back. No, they are not. I don't know whether they put the system back up and one of their servers was erased or whatever, such that all of my notifications are gone. I was getting a little panicky because I rely on Twitter to supply a number of items to this story, particularly my responses to stories, and the original stories are attached. And today's show would have been rather difficult to do if Twitter was completely down. Jonathan Ferguson says, demographic replacement and the suppression of free speech in the modern public square are the two great issues of the day. POTUS did virtually nothing about either. Okay. Jonathan Ferguson adds, my Twitter has been down for 2 years. Bernard Brightson said, Twitter is down for me too. Oh, Jonathan Ferguson makes a nice joke. Biden's son has a bigger substance abuse problem than Jordan Peterson. Okay. Apparently he doesn't like sports fall. Again, Kevin, do you really expect the FBI to prosecute federal crimes? That's a little unrealistic, no? I think it better become realistic, or confidence in the American government will simply collapse. And there's a phrase attributed to John F. Kennedy: when a peaceful protest becomes impossible, violent revolution becomes inevitable. And I think we're on the cusp. We're on the cusp of this. No, I don't really want to talk about baseball. Not right now, anyway. Jim Bowden says, why are you censoring me, KMG, when I mentioned the small hats? Small hats? I'm afraid I don't understand the reference. Monty Hall says, my Twitter is working. Jonathan Pohl, hello, Professor. Twitter decided to take itself down until after the elections. Yes, that was my suggestion of yesterday, that if the early results, which they're likely to do, show Trump far out in front on November the 3rd, will they just pull the stream down? Will they just, temporarily suspend their service? Because I don't know that it's possible for them to block everyone. Chad Chadson, our valiant moderator, says, I didn't see your comments, Jim. Must have been YouTube. Jonathan Ferguson, YouTube censors much small hat discussion. I doubt it's KMG. I have censored probably in total something about 5 comments in the 160 shows that I have done. Typically when we're being this has only happened, I think, once or twice, when we're being spam bombed by some malicious person. This is from Lucas Nolan at Breitbart. Facebook and Twitter censor Biden bombshells weeks after execs join his transition team. Yes, it's a seamless garment, one might say. Breitbart recently reported on the New York Post bombshell story. The leaked emails allegedly show that Hunter introduced his father to a Burisma executive less than a year before Biden, acting as beat, pressured the Ukrainian government into firing a prosecutor who was investigating the company. This censorship comes just weeks after executives from both Facebook and Twitter joined the Biden transition team. Breitbart reported in September that Twitter public policy director Carlos Monye left the social media company to join the transition team for Joe Biden. His specific role on the team has not yet been made clear, and the Biden transition team declined to comment. He will be serving as co-chair of Biden's Infrastructure Policy Committee. He's also worked in the world of presidential transition politics in the past, previously serving as the director of agency review on the team that prepared for Secretary of State Hillary Clinton's administration, which failed to take flight. He also worked for the Obama administration in 2008. Breitbart reported in October that Biden's transition team had hired top Facebook executive Jessica Hertz to its general counsel to oversee ethical issues. The move reportedly came as the campaign struggles with Facebook to have posts by President Trump censored on the platform. New York Post op-ed editor Sohrab Armani was one of the first to note that Twitter was blocking him from posting a link to the Biden-Ukraine story, claiming the link was potentially harmful. He called it a digital civil war. Oh, in response to this, the attempted suppression of the story, the House Committee on the Judiciary posted the story to their own official government website in hopes of bypassing the blocking of the post's URL. But Twitter promptly censored an official government website with a warning instructing users that they should not click on the link, calling it potentially unsafe. It unblocked the site, saying it was marked unsafe in error after Breitbart Tech requested comment on the extreme measure. Oh, House Judiciary GOP. Again, yeah, let's block that. Do these algorithms, do they alert them to any potentially highly sensitive blockings, suspensions, lockdowns, whatever? House Judiciary GOP responded, Twitter censored our last link, so we put the article on Representative Jim Jordan's website. Nice try, Jack, but we won't stop. And as mentioned earlier, they locked the account of White House Press Secretary Kayleigh McEnany. Social media giant Facebook also attempted to suppress the story. In a tweet, Andy Stone, and who is up to his neck in Democratic Party business, had tweeted, well, I will intentionally not link to the New York Post. I want to be clear that the story is eligible to be fact-checked by Facebook's third-party fact-checking partners. In the meantime, we are reducing its distribution on our platform. Senator Josh Hawley wrote to Mark Zuckerberg, the seemingly selective nature of this public intervention suggests partiality on the part of Facebook, and your efforts to suppress the distribution of content revealing potentially unethical activity by a candidate for president raises several additional questions to which I expect responses immediately. Yeah, what's the response going to be? Run as fast as you can. You can't catch me. I'm the gingerbread man. I suspect it'd be something like that. Or perhaps when Biden wins, you're all going to be in prison. That seems to be what the election is coming down to. Who is going to go to prison? With, of course, the Democrats accusing the Republicans of exactly that which they are doing. It's called projection. Oh, who else has jumped on board? Wikipedia, of course. According to T.D. Adler at Breitbart, Wikipedia has joined Twitter and Facebook in seeking to suppress revelations from the New York Post about Hunter Biden. Editors recently deemed the Post an unreliable source on Wikipedia and cited this as a reason to exclude mention of the story. Given how much there is about celebrity musicians like on Wikipedia, I'm guessing that there are potentially hundreds of thousands or millions of citations to the New York Post on Wikipedia. Are they going to remove them all? Or is the New York Post an unreliable source only with regard to politics? I wonder how many political references there are to the New York Post on Wikipedia. I suspect that there are rather a few. Previously, editors have slanted content on Wikipedia regarding the Biden-Burisma controversy and also joined in big tech censorship campaigns to suppress the name of the alleged whistleblower, Bagpipe, I call him. I can't mention him here or else YouTube will yank me right off the air. And that's happened to me already. Yes, the alleged whistleblower who sparked the Ukraine-focused impeachment of President Donald Trump. Yeah, it's quite remarkable. We have all these whistleblowers come forward all the time, and they are named, but this fellow was ever so special. Let's see, editor Soy Bangla promptly removed the material on the story, claiming this story smells and arguing it was based on unreliable sources. The editor who had added the material restored it and questioned how the Post and Fox News could be deemed unreliable. At the discussion page, Soy Bangla cited a list on Wikipedia of sources whose reliability has been assessed by the site community, which shows the Post listed as unreliable and Fox News discouraged for politically contentious claims. The Washington Post and the New York Times said for several years, that there was this vast conspiracy orchestrated by Vladimir Putin to steal the 2016 presidential election. Such was the paucity of information to bolster this story that when the House of Representatives impeached President Trump, their formal indictment had nothing about Russia in it. That's how reliable the New York Times and the Washington Post are. I could mention that they both flacked heavily for the outrageous, the obvious unlie that Saddam Hussein had weapons of mass destruction. Oh, what does The Guardian have to say about this? Carrie Paul. Facebook and Twitter restrict controversial New York Post story on Joe Biden. Social media platforms move to limit spread of article amid questions over its veracity. Oh, you mean, unlike all of those stories, hundreds, thousands of stories that the Washington Post has published and the New York Times, in just this year, that have no named sources, none, zero, and make the most outrageous claims. Oh, it's good to know that it's really all about veracity, because if a Washington Post journalist says something or a New York Times reporter, well, it must be legit. And the same thing is happening in Canada. Global News' Sean Boynton has a story, why a story about Joe Biden, his son Hunter, in Ukraine is being blocked online. Now, the story is pretty good up towards the end, where there are several paragraphs here that, no, this is all made up. It's all completely made up by the Republicans. And essentially, the story should have been suppressed. And the media is not trying to hide it anymore. Boynton is another court scribe supporting the monopoly of information by big tech. Now, again, one would have thought, or one might have thought, that journalists might be getting a little itchy, say, about companies such as Facebook and Twitter determining what is true and what is not true, and what journalists may say and what they may not say. No. They're on board because we can't have this misinformation. Yes. Victoria Brownworth is an American journalist. She is an award-winning investigative journo, formerly of the Baltimore Sun and the Philadelphia Daily News. She writes books. She is a real-life socialist. She's in favor of Medicare for all, Black Lives Matter, alphabet people in wheelchairs. I looked her up. Apparently, she's written a book about the epidemic of lesbian cancer. I'm not making this up. She said that Kayleigh McEnany, White House press secretary, has been locked out of her Twitter account for 12 hours, and that feels like a big story. Okay, how is it a big story, Victoria? The Trump cohort really is an extremist group. Am I taking crazy pills? The Trump cohort is an extremist group. And how do we know this is so? Because they've been suppressed by Twitter. QED. Someone called Samuel Goldman, who was an associate professor of political science at George Washington University, director of the Loeb Institute for Religious Freedom, literary editor of Modern Age, which was a periodical formed by the great Russell Kirk. And he's just so terribly bored. Terribly, terribly bored by this whole thing. There are so many more important stories out there. Hundreds of thousands are dead. Millions are unemployed or broke. Violent crime is way up. There's no school. Businesses are failing. But you know what really gets the very online community worked up? Content moderation. Yes. Apparently, the media can't comment on more than one thing at a time, or very online people can't do so. He went on, for the record, I support stronger anti-monopoly policy for social media and have said so in print, but studies show normal people care above all about jobs, getting sick, and violence. we very online types should listen to them. I responded, suppressio veri is never a good stance for a professor. And by the way, professor's supercilious. Normal people care about their politicians being crooks. They care a great deal. What he seems to be suggesting, I don't know if he understands this or not, but we don't need to worry about politicians being crooks. Just give people jobs, maybe UBI, maybe that will do. And we can have totally corrupt government because, the people, they don't care about it, according to Professor Goldman. My own experience in working in talk radio over quite a few years is that people care an awful lot about political corruption. I recall the infamous case of a conservative cabinet minister called Bev Oda, whose career was pretty much wrecked because she was on Canadian government business in London and she ordered a large orange juice at her hotel and it cost $16, and this was thought to be outrageous. My own view is it costs what it costs. If it's $16 for a large orange juice at your hotel, what are you supposed to do? Are you supposed to round up your security team and then take the limo out to a McDonald's, and this would save money? How exactly? But I just use that as illustration of my point that people do care about political corruption. A new revelation from the New York Post today from Emma Jo Morris and Gabrielle Font-Rouge. Hunter Biden pursued lucrative deals involving China's largest private energy company, including one that he said would be very interesting for me and my family. Emails obtained by the Post show. One email sent to Biden May 13, 2017, with the subject line "Expectations," included details about remuneration packages for 6 people involved in an unspecified business venture. Biden was identified as vice chair, depending on agreement with CEFC, an apparent reference to the former Shanghai-based conglomerate CEFC China Energy Company. His pay was pegged at $850, presumably, I don't know, that could be 1,000, could be million. And the email also noted that Hunter has some office expectations. He will elaborate. I hope these office expectations had nothing to do with women or sexual instruments. It just sounds, I'm not going to go any further than that. But that's not the real bombshell story. Follow up. And Sean Davis of The Federalist tweeted, Rudy Giuliani claims to have a text from Hunter Biden to Hunter's daughter, Naomi, in which Hunter claims that Pop, a family nickname for Joe Biden, forced Hunter and other family members to give Joe half their salaries from their various business deals. And here is the alleged email. I love all of you, but I don't receive any respect, and that's fine, I guess. Works for you, apparently. I hope you can all do what I did and pay for everything for this entire family. For 30 years, it's really hard, but don't worry, unlike Pop, I won't make you give me half your salary. Yeah. Of course, if this is true, or if this, I think if this accusation gets widespread distribution, I can't see how it could end with anything other than the end of Joe Biden's political career. But of course, I have been wrong about that before. Oh, and my notifications have come back on Twitter. Hooray, hooray. In more corruption news, this is from Breitbart News. C-SPAN suspended its political editor, Steve Scully, indefinitely Thursday after he admitted to lying about his Twitter feed being hacked when he was confronted about a questionable exchange with former Trump aide Anthony Scaramucci. The news came on the day it was supposed to be a career highlight for the 30-year C-SPAN veteran. Scully was to moderate the second debate between President Donald Trump and Democrat Joe Biden, which was canceled after Trump would not agree to a virtual format because of his COVID-19 diagnosis. A week ago, after Trump had criticized him as a never-Trumper, Scully tweeted, "Scaramucci, should I respond to Trump?" Scaramucci, a former Trump communications director and now critic of the president, advised Scully to ignore him. Yes. Yeah, he has confessed. He has confessed, and of course, this hacked Twitter accounts, I suppose it happens, or I suppose it has happened. But the question is, in any of these cases where people have sent out allegedly, outrageous tweets, or let's say unethical, perhaps, or just embarrassing, does anyone know of any cases where these tweets, Twitter accounts were actually hacked? Because I'm not coming up with any. Let's see, from the Daily Mail, Jeff Earl, deputy U.S. political editor. Republicans say they will subpoena Jack Dorsey over Twitter locking Trump campaign account and blocking users tweeting links to Biden Ukraine stories, and could target Facebook's Zuckerberg next. The plan to subpoena Dorsey to appear before the Judiciary Committee days before Election Day. We have seen big tech, we've seen Twitter and Facebook actively interfering in this election in a way that has no precedent in the history of our country, fumed Texas Senator Ted Cruz Thursday. And here's a picture of Jack Dorsey. And this guy has a lot of money. Why does he look like that? He looks like the kind of guy who sort of sidles up to you on the street and asks whether he can buy a cigarette from you. What is the point of being really rich if you don't take your money to make yourself look good? Does he think by making himself look, well, frankly, like a derelict, that people are going to think he's an ordinary guy? This is an ordinary guy who's censoring the President of the United States. So I guess he's not really an ordinary guy, is he? Cruz, Judiciary Committee Chairman Lindsey Graham, and Senator Josh Hawley of Missouri said the panel will vote October 20th on issuing the subpoena, with a plan to haul Dorsey before its members Friday, October 23rd, just days before Election Day. Cruz said they want to make Dorsey explain why Twitter is abusing their corporate power to silence the press. Okay. Vox Day is upset with Donald Trump over Section 230, which is the section in U.S. federal law which protects social media companies from, I don't know, incitement, if there's incitement, death threats, copyright infringement, all of this kind of stuff, if reasonable efforts are to take it down, when it becomes known, then they can't be held liable because they are a platform and not a publisher. Well, they've made it very clear now that they are, in fact, a publisher. And, let's see what's going on Twitter. Oh, no, Twitter is explaining the news to me now. Twitter is literally explaining the news to me, and then explaining to me in that insulting way, which they've picked up, from Axios? Here's why that matters. Yeah, I never would have imagined why social media suppressing a story alleging that not only was Hunter Biden, Joe Biden's grifter, crackhead, incestuous son on the take, but his father was as well. I never could have imagined, what the importance of that would be. So he updates the story. The God Emperor is on it. Trump had tweeted, "So terrible that Facebook and Twitter took down the story of the smoking gun emails related to sleepy Joe Biden and his son Hunter in the New York Post. It is only the beginning for them. There is nothing worse than a corrupt politician. Repeal Section 230. And Ajit Pai, who is the chairman of the Federal Communications Commission, he has weighed in. In a statement issued today, members of all three branches of the federal government have expressed serious concerns about the prevailing interpretation of the immunity set forth in Section 230 of the Communications Act. There is bipartisan support in Congress to reform the law. The U.S. Department of Commerce has petitioned the Commission to clarify ambiguities in Section 230, and earlier this week, U.S. Supreme Court Justice Clarence Thomas pointed out that courts have relied upon policy and purpose arguments to grant sweeping protections to internet platforms that appear to go far beyond the actual text of the provision. As elected officials consider whether to change the law, the question remains, what does Section 230 currently mean? Many advance an overly broad interpretation that in some cases shields social media companies from consumer protection laws in a way that has no basis in the text of Section 230. The Commission's General Counsel has informed me that the FCC has the legal authority to interpret Section 230. Consistent with this advice, I intend to move forward with a rulemaking to clarify its meaning. Josh Hawley tweeted 9 hours ago, Jack at Twitter, are you going to lock my account now? Bad move. Come explain your conduct under oath. And this is from Twitter to Josh Hawley. A new report at HawleyMO had been received. Oh, he was breaking the rules somehow, and they were going to have to punish him. Now, Steve Saylor makes an excellent point here in response to Jack's kind of sort of apology. Jack, have you ever censored news articles referring to the murder or killing by the police of fentanyl abuser George Floyd when neither has been proved in a court of law and autopsies suggest neither is likely? If not, why not? How many billions of dollars of arson and looting have unproven and false tweets about George Floyd, Michael Brown, Trayvon Martin, and Jackie Coakley caused? Did you censor news stories about the obvious Althea Bernstein hoax? How many tweets did you blithely transmit promoting the lies that Michael Brown at Ferguson and Hands Up Don't Shoot, or that George Zimmerman was white? How many stories, therefore, have been looted and buildings burned in part due to your activities? Okay. Apparently, it's terribly controversial that Donald Trump was given a town hall meeting in replace of the debate at the same time as Joe Biden. Completely outrageous. Apparently, this is one of the most dastardly crimes, not only in the history of American media, but in the history of America. Full stop. Boycott NBC has been trending for the last couple of days. Also fire Chuck Todd. Apparently he's the guy. Here's a story from the Hollywood Reporter. J.J. Abrams, Ava DuVernay, Mariska Hargitay among top 100 Hollywood players protesting NBC's Trump Town Hall. So they're like the committee of elders. A bunch of people in the entertainment industry are instructing people about morality and ethics. Really? Wow. Chris Maloney is on it. This Is Us star Sterling K. Brown, as well as heavyweights Aaron Sorkin, Greg Berlanti, Ryan Murphy, and Seth MacFarlane. You know Seth MacFarlane. He makes the buggery jokes on the Family Guy. That guy. Yeah. You know him. Yes. And the Hollywood Reporter, of course, says that Trump pulled out of the debate. Why did he pull out of the debate? One, because the Commission on Presidential Debates decided to moderate the rules without consulting with the Trump campaign twice. First, that there was going to be a mute button where they were going to deduct seconds from him. And secondly, the town hall. It's still going to be a town hall, but it's not really going to be a town hall because it's going to be done by Zoom, so that Joe Biden could read off his teleprompter. And why would Trump take that deal? Yes, Trump had COVID, and so we have to cancel this. We have to make it, remote, because otherwise he's going to infect everyone. He's going to kill everyone, apparently. That's not what his doctors say, but never mind that. But I think it's time for some more moral indignation from celebrities, because you just can't get enough of that. Just can't get it. This story is from Newsweek. Celebrities slam NBC's decision to hold Trump town hall. What's next? Hitler on America's Got Talent? Okay. Oh, yes, one of these celebrities being Billy Eichner, who's a particularly rebarbative homosexual who appears in every single one of these stories. Yes, he's the guy behind the Hitler accusation. So here are two tweets from Billy Eichner. The timing of the Trump town hall by NBC News is just so desperate and disgraceful. Don't you have any integrity at all? Have you learned nothing? It's pathetic. He's a white supremacist who's helped murder 220,000 Americans. What's next? Hitler on America's Got Talent. Okay. So the New York Post is being censored, and people who repost the New York Post are being censored because information unverified. Here's an accusation: the President of the United States is, one, a white supremacist, two, he's helped murder 220,000 Americans. Has this accusation been fact-checked? Do they know what murder means? What murder means: willful intent. So how the hell is this tweet still up on Twitter? He continued, by the way, I'm seeing a lot of Hollywood friends on here who jump to comment on everything else, who are silent on this. Speak up. This is exactly what got us into this nightmare, and why are so many people dead? Don't worry, they'll still hear your fucking peacock pitch. Okay? Okay, Jimmy Kimmel took part in this. Connecting star Shakina. At first I thought this was Shakira, and then I thought maybe she spells her name strangely. Okay? She tweeted, "Shame on NBC, y'all." She a Southerner? "Y'all sign my checks as of late, but I'm disgusted by my home network giving Trump a platform for fear-mongering, bigotry, and disinformation. Don't praise yourselves for putting a trans woman on primetime, then give a platform for someone who wants to abolish my rights." Okay. Shakina? Well, I looked her up. I looked this person up. Don't want to misgender this person. Shakina, described as actress, writer, producer, trans activist, priestess. What if this person means that literally? Shakina has 7,636 followers, which is fewer followers than I have. How can a person with fewer followers than I have be a celebrity? Oh, yes, someone called Tomi Ahonen, who has 63,000 followers. He describes himself, this is what he says. Meanwhile, in Beavis Trump corner, we have Eric Trump's Ukraine scandal, which seems to have been forced to trend by Twitter. And also, of course, we want NBC to fire Chuck Todd because of all the boycott MSNBC, and now the NBC blackout, which all brings us to fire Chuck Todd. Who's Tomi Ahonen? He describes himself as author, consultant, motivational speaker, biggest social media slut in mobile, a mad vidiot with the A in mad capitalized for some reason, F1 fan, globe-trotting digital gypsy 007 wannabe, the T-Dog. Does he really expect to be taken seriously with a self-description like that? Is that the way that adult men speak of themselves now? That's how they introduce themselves to the world? I kind of expect that sort of thing from women, but not so much from men. From the Daily Beast, Whoopi Goldberg and Joy Behar think Trump is lying about having COVID. The View co-host Sunny Hostin was the only one to offer up a reasonable explanation for Trump's swift recovery. Hey, wait a minute. Conspiracy theories are supposed to be verboten. Are they not? Goldberg said, you know what? The more he talks, the less I think he had it personally. That's just me. That's just me. Me too, Joy Behar said. I'm starting to think that too, Whoopi. I'm starting to feel like, really, Goldberg said, because I just feel like, wait a minute, I got a picture of Whoopi Goldberg in my head. And what is on her head, they're dreadlocks, but they're dyed sort of bluish purple, and they don't look like hair. Okay, they look like wool. Is that a wig? And I don't want to be, cruel, or I'm not attempting to be controversial. This is one of the ugliest women I've ever seen in my life. How on earth did she ever have a movie career? How is she supposed to be considered lovable? Because she literally has a face that would make children scream. How Hostin's co-hosts were not convinced about the experimental antibody treatment. It's not about the drugs, Behar said. He's a liar. How could you believe anything he says? Anything, etc., etc., etc. And I think that is Celebrity Roundup for now. But, back in I've been following celebrities pretty closely for 15 years or so, and sort of love-hate relationship, mostly hate, mostly a fascination with these people and the power and influence they have. Back in 2008, which was the year of the near economic collapse of the world, I thought that celebrities would be sobered by this and would, in response, act more circumspectly, but now they have become more hateful than ever. Now, in 2020, I think bonfire of the vanities soon. Let's see what Jay Fivekiller has to say. As we speak, Trump's minions are scouring the upper Midwest for working-class white voters like special forces teams looking for Saddam. If you're a forklift driver crouched in a spider hole in Eau Claire, Wisconsin, they're going to find you and you are going to vote. Let's see, anything more in that direction? No, we're going to move on here. I'm going to check in on the chat. Donald Robertson says most people lack the intelligence to use the term y'all in all its subtle nuances appropriately. Head McNeck says, looks like the FCC is legitimately moving on Section 230 concerning social media companies. This could be blocked by Congress, I suppose, but if Congress failed to block it, then it would go to where? To the courts and then end up in the United States Supreme Court? I don't know. I think this is looking pretty good, but I have been wrong before. Bulgarian horticulture specialist PhD says, tell that to Ted Danson. Did you ever hear the speech? It was a roast thing where Ted Danson was speaking about Whoopi Goldberg, and Whoopi Goldberg was right there on the dais. The full text, or close to it, was printed in Spy magazine, long gone. And reading it, I was like this. He said that? He was comparing black children to excrement. I'm not going to be any more graphic than that, but that's what he did. And he got away with that. Visionary Companion says Whoopi Goldberg is consistently mean and sullenly accusatory, which makes it easy to comment on her foul appearance without compunction. Buddy says Ted Danson did the most egregious blackface ever. Yes. Yes, indeed. Head McNeck says FCC has the authorities without Congress to define the terms of Section 230. Prussian Juncker, number one, says that was a great moment in celebrity history. And he does Smirnoff commercials nowadays. Good for Smirnoff. How many hit shows has Ted Danson been on? If you count Curb Your Enthusiasm, what is it, like 5 or 6? He has one of the most remarkable careers in television history. No question about it. Let's talk about libertarians. I do not like libertarians. A long time ago, when I was a callow youth, I considered myself a libertarian. I read Ludwig von Mises and Hayek and the Austrian economists, and I bought tons of books, dozens of books from Laissez-Faire Books in New York City. I subscribed to all of their magazines, and I grew out of it, as most callow youths do. Oh, has Radley Balco, has he removed the tweet, or has he just simply blocked me? Okay, it seems that he blocked me. Radley Balco, opinion journalist, Washington Post. Oh, he writes for the Washington Post. I associated him with Reason magazine. If you want a social media platform that allows the spread of disinformation favorable to your politics, go make one. There is no First Amendment right to stand on someone's soapbox, someone else's soapbox. Yeah, okay. And my response was libertarians circa 2024. If you want a banking system and utilities that allow the spread of disinformation favorable to your politics, go make them. There is no First Amendment right to credit or debit cards, telephones, electricity, or heat. Libertarianism is weaponized autism. Oh, and there's another group of autists, the people who call themselves true conservatives. They're almost all never Trumpers. Part of Conservatism, Inc. It's all about sinecures and posing and being pisseurs de copy. Anyway, this fellow called Eric Owens, once with the Daily Caller before it went insane, and once a U.S. Foreign Service officer and still an attorney. Oh, he has fewer followers than I do, but he could still be a celebrity. He wrote on Twitter, and here's another goober who believes public company means a company is somehow not private property. The stupidity in this country is simply unbelievable. Our educators have failed. To which I responded, true conservatives will cheer for their own castration so long as it's done privately by woke capital. The founders saw free speech as an absolute good, not as a procedural nicety. In the event, the Supreme Court of the United States has already ruled on this, Marsh versus Alabama, 1946. I spoke of that at length yesterday. Just a brief description. The Supreme Court held when a company town barred a Jehovah's Witness from handing out literature that the right of property is not absolute with regard to speech. That's simple. Now, Twitter and Facebook are pretty much monopolies. By any reasonable definition, they would be considered monopolies. If you want to go, yes, there's Gab and there are other sites. If you want to go where all of the important people are, they are on Twitter. They are not on Gab. They are not on the other sites. And the reasons why, if you want to communicate with the important people, or if you want to know what they are saying, and that includes the President of the United States, you go on Twitter. Let's see. Yes, David French. I believe I quoted him yesterday, but I'll do it again. Keep fighting. Ironically, the online right is begging for government help, just as the Democrats are favorites to take control. Will Biden, Schumer, Pelosi give them the relief they seek? It's possible and wise to disagree with Twitter without seeking government intervention. Unwoke Duffy responded, the true right has never been opposed to appealing to the sovereign for defense against abusive oligarchs and monopolies, clown. David French is constantly going on about God, but you can worship God or you can worship Mammon, and David French has made it very clear that he is a Mammon worshiper, and pick one. That would be my advice to him. Little Maddie Iglesias tweeted, freedom of speech means that you get to decide what happens on your platform, whether or not the Trump campaign likes it. I think all bookstores should stock 1 billion Americans because it's awesome, but free speech means they are free to choose. Dimitri Kolokotronis responded, what was the rationale progressive liberals had for making essential utilities public back a century ago, Matt? I forget. Also, something about freedom of the press being guaranteed only to those who own one was in their mouths a lot for some reason. If there was if Amazon decided that they weren't going to sell Matthew Iglesias's book, 1 Billion Americans, which, believe it or not, argues that America can and should house 1 billion people. I don't know whether it includes the risible argument that you could fit all of them and more into the state of Texas, solely in the state of Texas. Of course, Texas would be a hellhole. America would be a hellhole. If 1 billion Americans lived there, it would be closer to Nigeria than anything that has traditionally been the United States. But Iglesias doesn't give a toss about that. It's all about diversity and the GDP, as far as he's concerned. But, you know, if Amazon and Barnes and Noble, and let's say like all the book services decided no, they weren't going to sell Matthew Iglesias's risible new book, he might believe that there's been kind of a conspiracy against him by some powerful people. Okay, I'm going to talk about COVID now because we must, but this has got to come to an end. Right? I mean, one way or another, it's got to come to an end and come to an end soon, because there aren't going to be any economies left. I wonder whether there are going to be any governments left, because they don't need revenues. They can just borrow and borrow and borrow and borrow. Okay, someone called Richard Warnica with the National Post, he wrote on Twitter, if you're just logging back on after a nice weekend of looking at leaves and eating pie, that's a reference to Canadian Thanksgiving, I wrote about the second wave and the emotional toll of going backwards, even when it's the right thing to do. I should point out that Warnica is known to me because he is a conspicuous enemy of free speech. He wrote this long piece. He was one of the people who was involved in making Ezra Levant an unperson in Canada. It was remarkable how fast that happened. It took a week or so, and he was through. And anyone who was associated with him at 1 degree of separation or 2 or maybe more, they were in very serious trouble. Now, anyone who's ever listened to this live stream before knows I hold no brief for Ezra Levant, to put it mildly. But him going on about Ezra Levant becoming a very important person in some worldwide far-right network. What network would that be? Warnica, he seems to be terrified of dying. I'm looking at a picture of him. He would appear to be in his early 30s, but nonetheless, he's clearly terrified of dying. Once our summer of magical thinking comes to its inevitable end. Do you know what he means by magical thinking, or what the headline writer means by magical thinking? The idea that people could live lives, without the economy being smashed, society being smashed, and civil liberties being erased. Yeah, that's magical thinking, according to Richard Warnica of Canada's right-wing newspaper, The National Post. It was always going to end this way. once the bars reopened and the wedding halls filled up and the hovering terror of spring began to lift, a day like this was always going to come. It should have come sooner, in fact, based on everything we know, but it's here now. Reality is back. The pandemic is nowhere close to going away. Yeah, and seriously, what's the point of that? And then he talks about the lockdown. Ontario's been locked down away. All Ontarians everywhere have been asked again to stay home whenever they could, to work from home, to shop from home, to avoid leaving home for anything except the essentials: school, groceries, medical appointments, and maybe the occasional walk. That these measures were predicted weeks ago, that local officials in Toronto had in fact been begging for them since last Friday, doesn't make them any easier to take. And then he shed some crocodile tears for the people whose lives are being destroyed by this. In some ways, it feels heavier this time. There's a weight to the knowledge that we cannot see the end. I remember hoping in the spring that it would be over by Easter, by my daughter's birthday in May, by the time my nephew was born, and it felt over for a time. At least the worst of it did. We had a summer of magical thinking in Ontario, and I'm grateful that we did. Oh, so yes, magical thinking is his construction. Early on in the pandemic, months ago, not long before it stopped feeling new, I scribbled down a line from a book by Hanif Abdurraqib on a scrap of paper and stuck it in my notebook. I pulled that notebook out this week and the scrap slipped free. At some point, if anything is pushed far enough, it read, it is impossible to sustain. We are all, until this is over, pushing ourselves toward that limit. We are all walking on the borderline of too much to sustain. In Ontario, our testing system broke down last month. It was pushed too far. The contact tracing system followed. Where has that ever worked in the world? The ICUs are filling up again. I'll get back to that shortly. Something had to change. Okay. Here's the best part. 2 weeks ago, I was playing tennis with a friend outdoors and at a distance. When we were done, I took off my shirt to change, and he noticed a fingertip bruise on the left side of my chest. I've been so anxious at times these last 7 months that I've taken to pressing my right hand against my heart, hoping to push down the pain. I do it without noticing, until my friend pointed it out. I hadn't seen the bruise. I have family on the hospital front lines in Alberta. I have a brother who's a restaurant chef in Toronto. I have a newborn nephew who I've never met. I don't know when I will. I have come through this employed and healthy in a home full of support and love. I'm in many ways in the ideal position to get to the other side of this, whenever that may come. But I've struggled nonetheless, and in that I know I am far from alone. Our summer of magical thinking is over. This is going to be a difficult fall. Never be afraid to say that out loud. Yell it if you need to, or get paid to literally whine about your own cowardice in the pages of the National Post. Facts. It's supposed to be all about facts and science, right? Okay, well, how many people live in the province of Ontario? 14.7 million people. How many people die in Ontario every year? Well, between July the 1st of 2019 and June the 30th of this year, 115,126 people died. 115,126 people died in Ontario. How many people have died of COVID-19 in Ontario? 3,022. How many people are hospitalized for COVID-19? In the province of Ontario, population 14.7 million people, 253. How many people are in intensive care units in the province of Ontario? Population 14.7 million people, 62. This is not a crisis, but today's journalists can't understand any number higher than 1,000. And of course, if you're a man in your 30s and you're terrified of death, even when COVID-19 does not represent a significant threat to you or even close to it, obviously this is going to color your reporting. Another Canadian journalist, Mara Forrest, COVID round 2. Are we all still in this together. I must confess, despite my recent pledge that I would be, toujours gay, jamais triste, toujours gay, I saw red when I saw this. Yeah. Why? Because we've never been all in this together, to use that sinister Orwellian term. It just, yes, this is maybe the most Orwellian term ever invented. The elite, of which Maura Forrest is a member, declared war on the non-essentials, wrecked the economy, smashed society, and erased civil liberty to justify the sanitary dictatorship and ensure their hegemony. While I'm carrying on about the Canadian media, someone called Roxanne Kamsey, science journalist, Wired contributor, she writes, "I'm pretty annoyed that some of the smartest folks who could help quell this pandemic, how? By being smart? What, their brain power is going to radiate from their head and it's going to show that virus what? I'm pretty annoyed," writes Roxanne Kamsey, "that some of the smartest folks who could help quell this pandemic are instead having to waste their time debunking the Great Barrington Declaration." Frowny-faced emoji. Oh dear, a bunch of highly reputable scientists have said things which Roxanne Kamsey disagrees with that, but it's worse than that. As I responded, "You and your ilk have failed utterly. You've wrecked the economy, smashed society, and erased civil liberty. You won't admit your failures, so you must double down and induce even more misery. Such a catastrophic elite failure normally induces a revolution." Oh, Andrew Cuomo, the love gov, dishing it 24/7. He's decided to, let's take the war to the Jews. According to the Daily Mail, Governor Cuomo says religious practices in Orthodox Jewish communities has caused renewed spread of COVID-19 in New York. Okay, so the governor of New York is saying that Judaism is spreading disease. How can he get away with this? Isn't there supposed to be like screaming and tearing of hair, wringing of hands from the Anti-Defamation League and such like? Cuomo singled out hotspot neighborhoods across New York City and other parts of the state that are largely Orthodox Jewish strongholds. He said officials would monitor any potential mini clusters going forward so that appropriate measures could be taken to avoid future spikes. Cuomo last week imposed stricter regulations on 6 coronavirus hotspots in Brooklyn and Queens, as well as Broome, Orange, and Rockland counties. The state has closed schools and non-essential businesses in those areas and limited gatherings, including attendances at houses of worship. Yeah, okay. So guess what? The governor of New York, one would have thought that he was really, really busy, doing the bestest job in the whole of the US of A against COVID-19. Besides being directly responsible for the death of God knows how many old people, because he infected them by forcing infected people into old age homes. Molly Mansfield has a piece in the US Sun on his new book. New York Governor Andrew Cuomo's book on the handling of the coronavirus has been panned as a deranged victory lap written in the prose of a sociopath. The Washington Examiner Review was titled "Andrew Cuomo Might Be a Sociopath." The governor's book, American Crisis: Leadership Lessons from the COVID-19 Pandemic, was released on Tuesday. Journalist Atina Lowe dubbed the book as a way for Cuomo to crank out some drivel for personal profit while dealing with no real end in sight for the coronavirus. The tact and prose of a sociopath. And it's a stark and unpleasant cover. Cuomo also addresses a frequent criticism of his leadership style, that he's overly controlling. You show me a person who is not controlling, and I'll show you a person who's probably not highly successful. Apparently, he waited too long to mandate masks. So he's going to admit to that. Not that it has anything to do with it. Oh boy, here we go. Discussing the nursing homes, Cuomo said that Republicans decided to attack Democratic governors and blame them for nursing homes before stating that the party needed to add a conspiracy. How about the conspiracy of the order being on State of New York website officially and then being surreptitiously removed as thousands of oldies in New York State were, well, killed. Cuomo confirmed, that's not good writing or editing there, U.S. son. He claimed it was a lie. New York State never demanded or directed that any nursing home accept a COVID-positive patient. Lowe fumed in response. The only liar here is Cuomo, before attaching a copy of what she calls Cuomo's murderous nursing home order. You see how the U.S. Sun is very eager to be seen as neutral in this dispute, with Cuomo lying his head off about not something trivial, really, but the death. And I'll point out, the death in total isolation of many thousands of old people when they could have been sent to the Javits Center, or they could have been sent to the hospital ship. Nope. But Cuomo wasn't going to have that. Maybe he decided to show these oldies some tough love from the Love Gov. Let's see. I'm coming up fast on a theater Thursday, and I definitely have to have this wrapped up by 5 p.m. Pacific, because, again, I don't want you to miss any of these town halls. But from Lockdown Skeptics, strange things are afoot at the World Health Organization. Its chief scientist, Dr. Soumya Swaminathan, has penned a piece in the Telegraph reiterating her boss Tedros Adhanon's recent dismissal of herd immunity and setting out the WHO's recent position. Of course, the WHO is now saying that the COVID death rate is 0.13%, which is really rather different from what they were saying earlier. Yes, COVID is not categorically different. This is from an essay by Donald Boudreau at the American Institute for Economic Research. Since March, the coronavirus has been treated as if it is a danger categorically different from other dangers, including other viruses, but this treatment is deeply mistaken. The coronavirus is not a categorically different danger. It occupies a location on the same spectrum that features other viruses. Reasonable people can and do debate just where this location is. That is, how much more dangerous is the coronavirus than are ordinary flu viruses and other novel viruses that plagued us in the past, but the coronavirus is well within the same category as other viruses. Yet humanity has reacted and continues to react to the coronavirus as if it is a beast that differs from other health risks categorically. The hysterical overreaction by the press, public health officials, and politicians, an overreaction undoubtedly supercharged by social media, has convinced many people that humanity is today being stalked by a venomous monster wholly unlike anything to which we are accustomed. So, Alex Berenson responds to Matt Visor, the Biden campaign's decision to reveal exactly who tested positive and when, and announced that the last negative test for Kamala Harris, as well as the fact that it is currently doing contact tracing, all appear in sharp contrast to how the White House handled things a few weeks ago. Berenson says, "Remind me how many people died or wound up in intensive care following that catastrophic outbreak of illness at the White House." Hear me out. This is going to sound crazy. It's almost as if contact tracing and making a huge deal out of a flu-like respiratory illness is an utter waste of resources in a group of mostly healthy adults who are very likely to have few or any serious complications. Know this: if you do not fight back now, filing lawsuits, protesting board meetings, trying to recall board members, considering mass dismissals of teachers who will not do their jobs, your children may lose another entire year of school. Are you okay with that? Esther Chu, MD, MPH, had tweeted the official medical term for the herd immunity approach is let them sicken and die. I believe they teach at Neville Doctor School. Berenson says a strong, science-based, thoughtful response here. Everyone knew about herd immunity. That is to say, anyone who knew anything about disease and how viruses, they attack people, they infect people, they kill people, and it goes like this, right? Herd immunity. The virus wears itself out after the low-hanging fruit has been picked. But bulletin from Dr. Anthony Fauci, herd immunity sucks. I am right, and those weirdos from Harvard and Stanford and Oxford don't know what they're talking about. Where'd I put my mask? I know I had it on. Hold on. That's another podcast calling. Bulletin from Dr. Anthony Fauci. Oh, Shelby County Health Department to give away $125 Kroger gift cards at COVID-19 testing sites. Yes, health departments are so desperate to keep the pandemic alive, they will now pay you to get tested, which totally makes sense. $125, huh? And Berenson is having some fun with the Love Gov, Andrew Cuomo, because his book is, yes, very interesting. Despite a massive publicity campaign, the Love Gov's book, out on October 13th, ranks 777 on Kindle, meaning it has sold maybe 100 ebooks in the last 24 hours. It's 64 on the physical list, so maybe 500 hardcovers. That is not a good number. By the way, could the designers have come up with a less appealing photo or cover design? If a Trump book were this ugly, people would say it had been deliberately sabotaged. Meanwhile, the more the governor, emperor, viceroy talks about the good old days when he was Albany's Churchill, the deeper the hole he digs. Now he's saying hospitals in New York were never overwhelmed in March and April. Oh, then why did we all panic? All of which is to say that maybe puking out a book to cash in an undisclosed amount on leadership that led to more deaths than anywhere in the world wasn't the best idea. Maybe the Gov should have just stayed quiet and hoped no one would look too hard. Oh well, too late. Now, and again, quickly to the book club, but I want to talk about Tommy Lee, who some of you might remember as the drummer for Motley Crue, and once having been married to Pamela Anderson. I don't know how she styles herself these days. She has gone through many name changes. According to the Daily Wire, he is threatening to return to Greece if Trump gets elected. And he has come out, what was his Instagram message? Yeah, it is Instagram. Yeah. Just to give you an idea how these people think, okay? You Trumpsters better pray that liberals never gain control of the White House again, because we're going to pay you back so fucking hard for all of this shit. Planned Parenthood's on every damn corner. We're going to repaint Air Force One pussy hat pink and fly it over your beloved Bible Belt 6 days a week, tossing birth control pills, condoms, and atheist literature from the cockpit. We're going to tax your mega churches so bad that Joel Osteen will need to get a job at Chick-fil-A to pay his light bill. Speaking of Chick-fil-A, we're buying all those and we're giving them to any alphabet person your sick cult leaders tortured with conversion therapy. Try the McPence. It's a boiled, unseasoned chicken breast that you have to eat in the closet with your mother. The guns will be taken away, melted down, and turned into a gargantuan metal mountain emblazoned with the face of Hillary Clinton. Fox will be turned into a family refugee shelter. It goes on and on and on. And wow, Twitter is just lit about Tommy Lee. He's the energy that we all feel now. So what do we know about Tommy Lee? Well, as I mentioned, he was in Motley Crue, which is a very notorious band. And I suppose they got a pretty, light hand from law enforcement. How old were those groupies backstage for all those years? Did you pay much attention to that? Because I kind of think you didn't. So he's been married 4 times. His second wife was actress Heather Locklear. And then, yeah, okay. So a lot of women there, not particularly important. A sex tape released on the internet, 1995. Oh, it was stolen. Yeah, maybe, but you can't put this out. You can't sell this legally. If you do, you will be ruined. So they were lying. Anderson sued the video distribution company Internet Entertainment Group. Ultimately, they entered into a confidential settlement agreement. Thereafter, the company began making the tape available to subscribers to its website again. Oh, a very private moment between me and my wife was stolen. This is an outrage. You will pay. You will pay me, and then we'll be happy. Okay. In 1998, Lee served 6 months in county jail after pleading no contest to kicking Pamela Anderson while she was holding their son Dylan. During an altercation over Anderson's refusal to call and ask her parents not to come over to the family's house, Lee assaulted his wife, leaving her with bruises, a torn fingernail, and fear for the safety of her 2 sons, Dylan and Brandon. This is a really good part. Lee faced a 1998 lawsuit when he allegedly exposed a right-facing Nazi swastika tattoo on his arm to public scrutiny. The tattoo was actually a left-facing swastika. In 1996, Lee had pleaded no contest to criminal charges of battery against a Jewish photographer after Lee attacked the man outside the famous Viper Room in LA. When the photographer sued Lou, the swastika tattoo, which has since been removed, was said to be visible, and Lee's lawyer argued it would inflame the jury and create unfair prejudice against Lee. Shortly after claiming that the introduction of the tattoo into the court record would produce prejudice, Lee denied its existence. In October 1997, Lee, along with Nikki Sixx, was arrested in North Carolina after instigating a riot during a 1997 concert at Greensboro Coliseum. Motley Crue bassist Nikki Sixx allegedly made racist comments to a black security guard, suggesting that the crowd attack him. Sixx and Lee were said to have poured beer over the guard's head. I'm just wondering about this swastika, regardless of which way it was facing. If there was a court suit, was it on his neck? Was it on his face? You can cover these things up, but this is the Tommy Lee, moral conscience of the nation. And now, a little bit late, I'm going to talk about our movie, which came out this year on Netflix, and it's called I'm Thinking of Ending Things, and it is directed and written for the screen by Charlie Kaufman. And I got to tell you right up front, okay, this is an art film. And if you don't like art films, you are going to hate this movie. There's no other way that I can put it. Of course, a movie can be anything. I would say that this is, you could call it a tone poem. That sounds pretentious, I suppose, but I think that's a good way to describe it. Kaufman started out as a comedy writer. He wrote the screenplays for Being John Malkovich, adaptation Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind. The first movie that he wrote that he directed himself was Synecdoche, New York, which I quite liked. Again, if you don't like art films, you are going to hate that movie. The movie we're talking about now, it is based on a novel by a Canadian writer named Ian Reid. And you know he's Canadian because there's two I's in Ian. And this was thought to be a unfilmable novel. Of course, Kaufman would consider that a challenge, especially after the success he had with his script for adaptation, which is about a man called Charlie Kaufman, who was commissioned to write a movie script on a New Yorker piece, like the New Yorker piece, you know what kind I'm talking about, by Susan Orlean, about flowers, about rare flowers. And it doesn't work, so he writes himself into the script, and he creates a brother. And that movie is a send-up. It's a send-up of movie conventions, because that Charlie Kaufman in the movie says that I want to make a movie which is like life, essentially that nothing happens. And he gets into a big dispute with the screenwriting guru played by Brian Cox, who yells at him, "What are you talking about? Nothing happens." What Kaufman says is, it's true enough as far as it goes. You know, people will live thousands or tens of thousands of days during their life, and most of those days, really nothing significant or important happens. This is I suppose you could call it a chamber movie. There are very few actors in it. Jesse Plemons is the male lead. I know him from Breaking Bad and from El Camino, in which he played a psychotic but extremely polite gangster. I'm very impressed by his performance. I'm very impressed by him in this movie. An Irish actress named Jessie Buckley plays the female lead. Jesse Plemons' parents in the movie are played by Toni Collette, who is always good, and David Thewlis, who is always good. This the cinematography is by a Polish cinematographer called Łukasz Zal. And when I was doing Theater Thursday on Luke Ford's live stream, I discussed his movie Cold War cinematography, which I loved. Luke did not like that movie at all, but I liked it a great deal. And like Cold War, I'm Thinking of Ending Things is filmed in what they call the Academy ratio, or 4:3. You know, the way television sets used to work. I very much like his cinematography of Łukasz Zal. Everything technically about this movie is outstanding. I will say about the cinematography that its use in this movie increases tension, because you get the narrower frame, but it's filled. You know, it seems as if, you know, the characters want to burst out of the frame. The film is set mostly during a snowstorm in a car, which obviously presents challenges to a DP so that it doesn't become boring. Now, okay. Yep, in a car. Two characters, a man and a woman, who are dating. They just started dating. And I suppose you could compare this movie to being trapped in a car with, say, two autistic Oberlin college undergrads who are heavily dosed with Zoloft. You could say that if you wanted to. It's called I'm Thinking of Ending Things. Well, that's open-ended, isn't it? Because we know that the female lead, who is, we don't know what her name is, because she is called by several names, and ambiguity is a big part of Charlie Kaufman's world. What else is a big part? What else? Well, the play within the play. Okay, doppelgangers. All right. The idea that everything useful in life artistically has been done before. An obsession with age, growing old, and with time shifting, of moving back and forth in one's life. The idea that people play many different roles in their lives, and they're typically playing a role at any one particular time. These are things which we have come to know about Charlie Kaufman's work, and they are all in this, perhaps more intently than they have ever been. At first, I was thinking about the casting. Jessie Buckley, she's really good in this. She is exceedingly annoying when we first meet her. She is sour. She looks to be picking fights. She appears to want to be like 100 miles or 1,000 miles away from her boyfriend. And at first I thought, she's simply not good looking enough to be this gloomy and unpleasant. But we see how this changes again and again in the movie, and it's like real life to that extent, that okay, there's only so much ambiguity that you can typically allow in a movie, because it's going to confuse people, perhaps even frighten them. But we see Jessie Buckley's character, we see her as being annoying, we see her as being obtuse, we see her as being pretentious, but we also see her as being eager to please and kind and putting up with treatment that, I don't know, a reasonable woman wouldn't put up with, especially from her boyfriend. You know, the first part of the movie, I was thinking, if I was driving that car and that woman were in the driver's seat, I would have a very strong temptation to stop the car, to open the passenger seat door, and to push her into the snow and then drive off. So where are they going? They are going, and presumably this movie is set in Oklahoma, and the musical Oklahoma is exceedingly important to this movie. And they are going to visit Jake, that's Jesse Plemons' character, parents. And they live in a farm. It's a very remote place. And they show up and things get weird. One, because the parents don't seem to come downstairs or want to come downstairs. And Jesse takes them to various parts of the farm where he tells them about where the pigs died. And the pigs had become infested with maggots because they'd been neglected, because his father wasn't as active as he was. And we're shown 2 dead lambs who are frozen and apparently are going to remain frozen until spring. And Jessie Buckley's character is quite put out at this. Now, who is she? She Lucy, Louisa, Lucia, Amy. What does she do for a living? Well, apparently she's a waitress, or she's a painter, or she's a poet, or she's studying nuclear physics. And who knows whether those things are true, or to what extent what we're seeing in this film is a fantasy. The movie is very good at really depicting what dreams are like. Because dreams they're usually quite random. You get these radical tonal shifts in them. There's not much in the way of continuity in terms of narrative. Obvious facts are wrong in dreams, and this is what this movie is like. Now, there's a character played by Guy Boyd who's a janitor at a school. And he's an older man, and he's heavily overweight. And he seems to be very much attracted to the high school players who are putting on a production of Oklahoma. And it has been suggested that this entire movie is a fantasy that he has created, and a fantasy in part based on the Rodgers and Hammerstein musical Oklahoma. Now, there's a song which doesn't appear in the movie version, but appears in the original. And I'm going to read the lyrics because it's very important to the film. The floor creaks, the door squeaks, there's a field mouse a-nibbling on a broom, and I sit by myself like a cobweb on a shelf by myself in a lonely room. But when there's a moon in my winder and it slants down a beam across my bed, then the shadow of a tree starts a-dancing on the wall and a dream starts a-dancing in my head. And all the things that I wish for turn out like I want them to be, and I'm better than that smart aleck cowhand who thinks he's better than me. And the girl I want ain't afraid of my arms, and her own soft arms keep me warm, and her long yellow hair falls across my face just like the rain in a storm. The floor creaks, the door squeaks, and the mouse starts a-nibbling on the broom, and the sun flicks my eyes. It was all a pack of lies. I'm awake in a lonely room. I ain't gonna dream about her arms no more. I ain't gonna leave her alone. Going outside, get myself a bride, get me a woman to call my own. Now, the Jake character, well, he's a school teacher. Or is he a school teacher? You know, maybe he's the janitor. Maybe that was where he ended up. But apparently he's a very, very smart fellow, well-educated, very knowledgeable about all sorts of subjects, about poetry, Wordsworth. He knows about science. He knows about David Foster Wallace. He knows a lot about musicals. But we learned something about him, that his mother in particular is going on about how very, very smart he is. But the question is he really all that smart? And we learned something very important about him, that he had been given an award in school for diligence. And his mother was so proud of this. And finally, he gets angry. He gets angry several times with his mother because his mother is acting in a foolish, almost hysterical way. She acts very differently in other times in the movies. And again, people tend to base their judgment of other people. You know, they think we can only see other people through our own eyes and interpret them through our own consciousness. There's no other way that this can be done. It turns out that he wanted the acumen badge, that essentially the diligence badge is it's the medal that everyone gets for participating. Now, the woman, she's supposed to be a painter, and we see her paintings, and they are very good. They're very good indeed, and they're real paintings from the real world. So Jesse Plemons, he apparently was a painter as well, and he tells him to shut up, you know. And we see his paintings later on, that they are rather crude impersonations of Vincent van Gogh. You see this in Charlie Kaufman's movies a lot, this imposter syndrome. And we get, I don't know, the imposter syndrome from both characters, but most acutely from Jake's character. Now, if you know the musical Oklahoma, you know it's about a menage a trois between Judd, who sings Lonely Room, and he wants Lori to be his wife, but he has a rival in Curly, the cowhand. And we see this split, bifurcated character, where I think we can say that Jake, he wants to be Curly, but he is more like Judd. And Judd is a resentful, murderous character. And the longer this movie goes on, the scarier that Jesse Plemons' character becomes. because it would seem that everything about himself he's made up, and everything about the woman, his supposed girlfriend, has been made up as well, even to the extent of talking about Jenna Rollins in Cassavetes' film A Woman Under the Influence, where the woman starts speaking in this very affected voice and delivers this very long, closely worded, convoluted demolition of her acclaimed performance in that Cassavetes movie. Now, I was unfamiliar with it, but I recognized the tone, and I thought, is that Pauline Kael? And I found out that yes, it was indeed Pauline Kael, something that she had written. And there's just this particular kind of, what would I say, striving for effect, offensiveness, a pretension. I'm the cleverest person in the room. Of course, there's a meta-commentary in this, in that what she says about Jenna Rollins' performance is that it is well plotted. The movie is well plotted, but not thought out. And of course, Kaufman realizes that people are going to make the same criticism of this movie. I'm thinking of Ending Things, thinking of what? Breaking Up with Jake or Killing Myself. We see, and very beautiful and moving it is too, this there's a famous dream ballet in Oklahoma, which is replicated in the movie. It's beautifully done. And we see a replication of, Judd's attack on Curly. It ends up rather differently in this case. And the movie ends, well, with great ambiguity. I should mention that another thing this movie is about, and we've seen this in a great many of Kaufman's films, it's expressed in the movie directly that, you start down a road in life, and this happens to everyone, and then after a while you find out that all the other possible avenues, they're no longer possible. And I suppose what you also see in this movie is the idea of predestination, particularly with regard to romantic attractions and romantic attachment. There's also a very funny rom-com joke, which incredibly involves a director that you would not associate with rom-coms, and I won't spoil it for you. But I very much enjoyed I'm Thinking of Ending Things, but I will warn you once again, if you don't like art films, you're going to hate this film. Donald Robertson says that if your mom doesn't think you're smart, you may as well forget it. Yeah, before I go, I'll just mention what is coming up on Theater Thursday next week. It is, 9 days before Halloween. So Nosferatu by Werner Herzog, his 1979 homage to Friedrich Murnau's 1924 original, and October 29th, Robert Wise's 1963 film, The Haunting, one of the scariest films I've ever seen. Tomorrow on the book club, I'm going to be discussing Democracy, the God That Failed by the economist Hans Hermann Hoppe. And Dionysus says, Kevin, could you please make a list of all your film and book recommendations? Yeah, Luke Ford has got his list, and I can add to that. Okay, I'll put it up or make a link to it. Anyway, I'm going to let you go because the town halls are starting in less than 2 minutes. And if you'd like to show any part of it, I appreciate it if you click on the like button and subscribe to my YouTube channel if you have not done so already. If you would like to make a donation, and I could really use a donation at this time, my PayPal account is kevin_grace@hotmail.com. If you're Canadian, you can send money directly via Interact at kevingrace@shaw.ca. And I will leave you with this benediction. In these days of social atomization and civilizational collapse, I do really wish that you, my dear listeners and viewers, manage to find a genuine human connection in order to ease the burden. Good night.